I didn't scream. I didn't fight back. I didn't even warn her. I stayed silent while my own mother destroyed herself. From the outside, it probably looked like I was weak, like I was afraid, like I didn't notice what was happening right in front of me. But the truth is much darker than that. I saw everything. I saw the lies piling up. I saw the money disappear. I saw how she slowly turned our family into enemies and still smiled like the victim. And I chose silence, not because I forgave her, not because I loved her too much, but because sometimes the most powerful silent revenge is doing absolutely nothing and letting karma work without interference. Growing up, my mother was the kind of woman everyone admired, strong, organized, always right. Friends told me how lucky I was. Teachers praised her. Relatives listened when she spoke. Behind closed doors, she ruled our family with control, guilt, and fear, and called it love. I didn't realize it at first. None of us did, because family betrayal doesn't arrive loudly. It whispers. It disguises itself as concern. It pretends to protect you while slowly taking everything away. She managed every detail of my life, my choices, my relationships, my future. She spoke for me before I could speak for myself. And every time I tried to push back, she reminded me of everything she had sacrificed. I learned early that fighting her only made things worse. So I adapted. I watched. I listened. While everyone else believed her version of the truth, I started noticing the cracks, the inconsistencies, the way she manipulated stories depending on who was listening, the way she positioned herself as the hero and quietly cast me as the problem. What no one knew was that I had stopped defending myself. I let her talk. I let her exaggerate. I let her rewrite history, because the more she spoke, the more she exposed herself. This wasn't anger. This wasn't hate. This was patience. I understood something most people don't. When someone is addicted to control, you don't need to push them over the edge. They'll walk there themselves. I stayed silent while she burned bridges. I stayed silent while she made decisions that would later trap her. I stayed silent while she convinced herself she was untouchable. And every time someone asked me why I didn't say anything, I just smiled, because I knew how this story would end. Not with screaming, not with revenge fueled by rage, but with karma, slow and undeniable, arriving exactly when she least expected it. If you've ever been betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect you, if you've ever been underestimated because you chose silence, then you already understand. This is the story of how my mother lost everything and how I finally took my life back without lifting a single finger. And this is only the beginning. Before anyone judges what I did or what I didn't do, you need to understand the world I grew up in. From the outside, my childhood looked stable, safe, almost perfect. A clean house, home-cooked meals, a mother who never missed a school event. People said I was lucky. What they didn't see was how carefully everything was controlled. My mother didn't yell much. She didn't need to. Her power came from disappointment, from silence, from that look that made you feel like you had failed as a human being. She decided what was best for everyone, where we went, who we spoke to, what we shared with others. And if you disagreed, she didn't argue. She reminded you of your debt. I gave up everything for you. After all I've done, this is how you repay me? You'd be nothing without me. That was her favorite weapon. By the time I was a teenager, I had learned to measure every word. I learned how to read her mood the moment she walked into a room. I learned when to stay invisible. That's how family betrayal begins, not with cruelty, but with conditioning. She told everyone she was raising me to be strong and independent. In reality, she made sure I couldn't move without her approval. She handled all the finances for my own good. She spoke to relatives on my behalf. She corrected my memories when they didn't match hers. If I remembered something differently, she'd laugh. "You're too sensitive. That's not how it happened. You always twist things." Over time, I stopped trusting my own instincts. This is how silent revenge starts, long before revenge is even a thought. It starts when you realize that speaking the truth only makes you look crazy. I watched her slowly turn small disagreements into public stories, stories where she was the exhausted mother and I was the difficult daughter. Relatives started looking at me differently. Friends hesitated around me. Even teachers treated me like I was fragile or problematic. She never told outright lies. She didn't have to. She simply left out parts of the story, rearranged timelines, added emotional details that couldn't be proven. And every time she would end with the same line, "I don't know what I did wrong." I tried at first. I tried to explain myself. I tried to defend my character. Each attempt backfired. The harder I pushed, the more she cried. The calmer she stayed, the more unstable I appeared. That's when I understood something crucial. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was strategy. And the scariest part? She believed her version of events. She wasn't playing a role, she wasn't acting. She genuinely saw herself as the victim, and that made her dangerous. That's when I stopped reacting. I started listening instead of correcting, observing instead of explaining. Because when someone is convinced they're always right, karma doesn't need help. All it needs is time. And my mother was already planting the seeds of her own downfall. She just didn't know it yet. Once I stopped reacting, things got quieter on the surface, but underneath, everything began to rot. My mother didn't like my silence. At first, she interpreted it as obedience. She smiled more, spoke for me more often, made decisions without even pretending to ask. But silence isn't submission, it's distance, and she felt that distance growing. That's when the manipulation shifted. She started involving other people. Aunties called to check on me. Family friends asked if I was doing okay. Even neighbors suddenly seemed concerned. The message was always the same, wrapped in sympathy. Your mother is worried about you. What they really meant was, your mother is talking about you. This is how family betrayal evolves, quietly, socially, with witnesses. She told people I was withdrawn, ungrateful, confused. She said I didn't appreciate everything she'd done. She implied I was unstable without ever using the word. And the more she spoke, the more isolated I became. I noticed invitations stop coming, conversations end faster. People choose their words around me. Still, I said nothing. That was the hardest part. Every instinct in me wanted to scream my side of the story, to expose her lies, to demand fairness. But I had learned the pattern. Confrontation only fed her narrative. Emotion only validated her performance. So I stayed calm. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She started to overreach. She tightened control over money she claimed was for the family. She borrowed in my name, just once at first. She reassured me it was temporary, necessary. "You trust me, don't you?" she asked. Of course I did. She was my mother. Or at least that's what I told myself. But something felt wrong. Bills arrived that didn't make sense. Statements she said were handled never appeared. When I asked questions, she'd sigh dramatically. "Why are you so suspicious of me? After everything I've done, this is hurtful." Guilt was her currency, and she spent it freely. This wasn't just control anymore. This was erosion. I watched her pit relatives against each other. I watched her rewrite financial histories. I watched her gamble with trust like it was endless. And still I stayed silent. Not because I was powerless, but because I was paying attention. This is the phase people don't understand about silent revenge. It's not passive, it's observant. Every contradiction went into my memory. Every emotional outburst revealed a weakness. Every lie required another lie to support it. She was building a house of cards, and karma is patient. The more she manipulated, the more reckless she became. The more reckless she became, the more visible the damage was to anyone who looked closely. I didn't push, I didn't warn, I didn't interfere, because she wasn't just hurting me anymore. She was exposing herself, and once that started, there was no way to stop it. I always thought my breaking point would be loud, a fight, a confession, a moment where everything exploded at once. I was wrong. It arrived quietly, disguised as paperwork. One afternoon, a plain envelope showed up in the mail. No warning, no explanation, just my name and numbers that didn't belong to me. Debt. Not small mistakes, not misunderstandings, real damage. My credit, my future, my name. I sat at the kitchen table rereading the pages until the words blurred. This wasn't one bad decision. This was a pattern. When I confronted her, calmly, carefully, she didn't panic. She didn't apologize. She laughed. "You're overreacting," she said. "It's handled. Why are you trying to make me look like the bad guy?" That's when something inside me cracked. Not anger, not hatred, clarity. In that moment, I finally saw her not as my mother, but as a person who would sacrifice anyone to protect her image. This wasn't love twisted by fear. This was family betrayal fully formed. I asked one final question. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her face hardened. "Because you would have made a scene." There it was. My pain wasn't a concern. My consent wasn't necessary. Only her comfort mattered. I felt myself shut down emotionally, like a door closing without sound. Tears came later, alone, in the dark, where she couldn't see them. That night, I didn't sleep. I replayed every memory. Every time she dismissed me, every time I stayed quiet to keep the peace. And I realized something terrifying. She expected me to clean up the mess. She expected my silence to continue. She expected forgiveness without accountability. That's when silent revenge truly began. Not as a plan, not as a scheme, but as a decision. I would stop protecting her from consequences. I wouldn't expose her. I wouldn't confront her again. I wouldn't warn anyone. I would simply step back and let karma find its way. Because people like her don't collapse from one truth. They collapse when the lies have no one left to stand on. The next morning, I spoke to her like nothing had changed. Same tone, same politeness, same silence. And she relaxed. She thought she had won. What she didn't realize was that I had stopped carrying her weight, stopped correcting her stories, stopped absorbing her chaos. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And when I did, the structure she built on manipulation and control began to wobble. Not because I pushed it, but because I was no longer holding it up. I didn't rush to fix what was broken. I let it sit. That was the hardest part, pretending everything was normal while my trust lay in ruins. I answered her messages the same way, reacted to her posts, showed up when expected. On the surface, nothing changed. Inside, everything had. This phase of my revenge story wasn't about punishment. It was about positioning. I needed to understand the full scope of the family theft before I touched a single domino. I watched carefully, listened more than I spoke, let her believe she was still ahead. She grew careless. With confidence came arrogance. She talked openly about her smart decisions, about how people respected her now, about how different life feels when you stop worrying about money. Every word confirmed what I already knew. The betrayal wasn't fueled by desperation. It was fueled by ego. That made my resolve unshakable. I began protecting myself quietly. I secured my accounts, changed access, set alerts, moved what remained of my savings into places she couldn't reach. No drama, no confrontation, just silent walls rising around what was left of my life. Then I waited. This wasn't revenge through exposure, not yet. It was revenge through gravity, through letting her momentum carry her forward until there was nothing left to support it. Because when someone builds their image on stolen ground, collapse is inevitable. The more she spent, the more she relied on appearances. The more she promised, the more she committed to a lifestyle she couldn't sustain without continuing the family theft. And since that pipeline was quietly closing, pressure began to build. I saw it in the cracks. She became anxious, defensive, asked questions again, careful ones about my finances, about whether I'd changed banks, about future plans. I answered vaguely, calmly. I let her uncertainty grow. Gaslighting stopped working when I stopped reacting. This revenge story didn't require me to lie. The truth was already doing the work for me. All I had to do was step out of her way. When she stumbled, I didn't catch her. When she hinted at needing help, I listened but didn't offer solutions. When she complained of stress, I nodded and said nothing. I wasn't cruel, I wasn't cold. I was done enabling the betrayal. The turning point came quietly. No announcement, no argument, just a shift. Invitations slowed. Her social presence dulled. The admiration she'd chased began to fade as the spending stopped. People who applauded her generosity disappeared when it dried up. That's when I knew karma had entered the room. I didn't push, I didn't expose, I didn't gloat. I let consequences find her naturally, the same way the family theft had found me, slowly, invisibly, unavoidably. This was the moment most people imagine revenge to end, but I wasn't finished yet, because the most powerful part of this revenge story wasn't watching her struggle. It was watching her realize far too late that the person she underestimated had already moved on. And that realization was about to cost her far more than money. Karma didn't arrive with sirens or shouting. It came disguised as normal life continuing without support. Once the access was gone, the family theft couldn't continue, and without it, her lifestyle began to unravel in ways she couldn't explain. Bills piled up, promises became excuses, confidence turned into tension she couldn't hide, no matter how hard she tried. I watched from a distance. This wasn't satisfaction yet, it was confirmation. The people she'd tried to impress started asking questions, quiet ones at first, then sharper ones. Why she couldn't cover things anymore, why plans kept changing, why her generosity suddenly had limits. The admiration she'd chased evaporated, because admiration built on spending is conditional. It lasts as long as the money flows. She came to me eventually. Not directly, not honestly. She framed it as stress, as being overwhelmed, as a rough patch. She talked around the truth, never touching it. She asked if I'd noticed anything strange with my accounts, if maybe there'd been a mistake somewhere. I met her eyes and told her calmly that everything was secure now. That was it. No accusation, no anger, just a boundary. Something in her face shifted, a flicker of understanding, of fear. She realized the ground beneath her was gone, and that I wasn't going to rebuild it for her. This revenge story didn't need a confession. Her unraveling said everything. The real karma came later when consequences stacked up without my involvement. Missed payments, awkward conversations, the slow loss of credibility. People stopped trusting her stories, stopped inviting her out, stopped seeing her as impressive. Image is fragile when it isn't earned. The betrayal that once empowered her now isolated her, and unlike money, reputation doesn't refill quietly. She never apologized. Not really. She hinted, she deflected, she minimized. That was all the closure I needed, because accountability doesn't always come as an apology. Sometimes it comes as being forced to live with the truth. And the truth was simple. She'd stolen from family to impress strangers. Now she had neither. Watching that wasn't joyful, it was sobering. I didn't feel victorious, I felt free. Free from the weight of protecting someone who never protected me. Karma didn't ruin her life, it just stopped saving her from it. That's the kind of justice that lasts. And as her world grew smaller, mine began to expand, quietly, steadily, without spectacle. The family theft no longer defined me, the betrayal no longer controlled me. This revenge story was nearing its end. But the most important part wasn't what happened to her, it was what happened to me afterward. After everything collapsed, people expected me to feel victorious. They were wrong. There was no celebration, no satisfaction, no moment where I felt like I had won. What I felt was exhaustion. Years of tension left my body all at once. The constant vigilance, the emotional math of every conversation. When it stopped, I didn't know who I was without it. My mother withdrew after that. Not dramatically, just enough to protect what remained of her pride. We spoke less, and when we did, the conversations were shallow, cautious. She never apologized. I stopped waiting for one. That was my real freedom. This is the part people don't talk about when it comes to family betrayal. Even when karma feels fair, it still hurts, because you're not grieving who they were, you're grieving who you hoped they'd become. I had to learn that my silence wasn't cruelty, it was self-preservation. That my silent revenge wasn't about punishment, it was about refusing to disappear so someone else could feel powerful. I rebuilt slowly. New routines, clear boundaries, financial independence, in my own name, under my own control. I learned to trust my instincts again, to stop second-guessing my memory, to believe myself. The most difficult part was unlearning guilt. Guilt for not fixing things, guilt for stepping away, guilt for choosing peace over loyalty. But guilt fades when you realize you were never responsible for someone else's choices. My mother still tells her story, quieter now, less confident, without the certainty that everyone will agree. And I let her, because I no longer need to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding me. If there's one lesson this taught me, it's this. Silence isn't weakness. Distance isn't cruelty, and walking away doesn't make you heartless. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining and let karma handle the rest. I didn't destroy my mother. I stopped saving her from herself, and in doing so, I finally saved me. Time didn't heal everything, but it changed the weight of it. Months passed, then years. The story stopped being something I relived and became something I understood. My mother and I exist in the same world now, but not the same emotional space. There are no dramatic confrontations left to have, no truths waiting to explode, just distance and clarity. She still believes she did what she had to do. I no longer need her to see things my way. That's the quiet power that comes after family betrayal, when you stop hoping someone will finally understand the damage they caused. People sometimes ask me if I regret staying silent, if I regret not exposing everything, if I regret letting karma take its time instead of forcing the truth. I don't, because silence protected me when nothing else could. Because silent revenge wasn't about watching her fall, it was about stepping out of a role that was slowly erasing me. If I had fought her publicly, she would have thrived on the chaos. If I had tried to prove her wrong, she would have turned it into evidence of her victimhood. Walking away took away her stage. And when someone lives for control and validation, that's the one thing they can't survive without. Today, my life is quieter. Not perfect, but honest. I make choices without asking permission. I trust my memory. I protect my peace. The damage she caused didn't disappear, but it no longer defines me. And maybe that's what real justice looks like. Not humiliation, not revenge that leaves scars, but freedom. If you're listening to this and seeing pieces of your own life in it, if you've ever been painted as the problem for refusing to be controlled, if you've ever wondered whether staying silent makes you complicit, it doesn't. Sometimes silence is how you survive. Sometimes it's how you reclaim yourself. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people live with the consequences of who they choose to be. So I'll leave you with this. If the person who hurt you is slowly destroying themselves and speaking up would only pull you back into the fire, would you stay silent or would you step in and save them again?